Hello, this is Jim Lane, the mayor of Scottsdale, taking another occasion to talk to the citizens of Scottsdale about some of the things that your city is doing in working through a process with the COVID-19 contagion and how we're going about it. And so there's a particular individual that's heading up a very important aspect of our response to the COVID-19 contagion, and his name is Troy Lutrick. He happens to be our incident management team leader, and that team has been working steadfastly on making sure the city is protecting those critical infrastructure functions that the city is responsible to maintain throughout for our community and for the really in part with the state and everything else. And those critical infrastructure items, assets, if you will, there's 55 of them in the federal stance of things, and we have at least 5 of them with public safety and first responders and fire and EMS, of course. And then, of course, government itself is considered a critical function, and therefore all the items that come under the designation of maintaining civil process, our civil liberties, but at the same time making sure that we're addressing the disaster at hand. Now, it takes a lot of different forms since the time that I actually had a declaration of an emergency on March 17th. But in the meantime, Troy has been working closely with the entire city staff and other stakeholders. 85% of the critical infrastructure is held in private sector. And so the partnership between government critical infrastructure items is hugely important, that we're working together to make sure we maintain food supply chains, transportation, national defense, all manner of things that keep our community alive and thriving. So with that, I should just say there's a little bit of background, and it started as a firefighter. He started as a firefighter, and that's Troy. But he's worked with FEMA and with the USAID Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. And so he's got a great bit of background from the standpoint of actually actively being on the job in this capacity, but also in instructing. The incident management system, which he taught, is actually a critical component in our national agenda of how do we maintain the civil protection right here under Homeland Security and, of course, our federal government. With that, I'm going to just go ahead and introduce Troy. It's nice to have you here with us to talk about a few things. And, I gave a little bit of the lay of the land, as you may have just heard, as far as the city's looking at it, and how important your role is working with our partners. And what I would want you to, if you can, share with the public, and with me, of course, I think I'm a little closer to it than they may be, but nevertheless, share with us a little bit about how this disaster, this emergency being COVID-19 and that contagion, has it made a different kind of mission for you? Or how is your mission and mission development changed as you go about your business with the city in sort of guiding us along the way, collaboratively, of course, with all of the branches of our government? But how do you bring that all together? And is COVID-19, has it done something specific, to change some of what you've learned through the past?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the time to explain some of this. I think it's really important for the citizens to understand the process that we are performing in the background, essentially, to keep the city moving, keep the citizens informed. So my job as the emergency manager for the city is really to coordinate, and I consider myself somewhat of an air traffic controller. I want to make sure planes aren't launching at the same time they're trying to land, and but there's pilots in charge of each of those planes, and they all do different things, heading different ways, so to speak. And so my job is to bring in the experts, the logistical experts, the planning experts, both internal and external, and to make sure that everybody understands that we're working together in a collaborative manner, rather than everybody's in it, on their own, kind of in their separate lanes. But to have a cooperative and collaborative manner, organized process, regular meetings, things that keep us all on track and we understand what the mission is. So, COVID-19 is an unusual situation for sure for any emergency manager, but certainly for us here in Scottsdale. And it's changed the way we live on a daily basis. And that affects our citizens that we're here to support and help. So what I'm trying to do and what I'm trained to do is to bring all of those subject matter experts together in an organized fashion so we can work together to keep the city up and running and to provide the services that we need to provide the citizens, so they can be safe and well cared for.
I think it's a great sort of overview of all of that. But when we talk about this field of things, as we were talking about critical infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of players in the public well, I should say in the private sector. We in the public sector have sanitation and we have water supply, we have police and fire, as we've talked about before. But in the private sector, it's imperative that we coordinate and collaborate and judge those landings and those takeoffs between them. Has that worked well in this particular kind of emergency?
It has worked well, really well for us, and a lot of that is some of the expectations that were set at the beginning, both internally in the organization and externally. And the private sector, as you mentioned, holds 85% of the critical infrastructure across the nation. So they are our partners, hand in hand in helping recover the city. So although we're still kind of in that response phase, we started the recovery branch inside of our organization about 3 weeks ago, and we have some very smart people that are working on that recovery, and they are in contact directly with the businesses and the infrastructure leaders on the outside of the city, so that we work at the same pace, so that we work together cooperatively to make sure that we move towards somewhat of a normal or a new normal, whatever that looks like in the future, as quickly as we can.
Excellent. Would you say that there is a way for you to sort of measure success in the environment that you have? Is it just a sense of peace when you go to sleep at night, or is there something more tangible that you can sort of point to?
So I think that's a great question, Mayor. In a typical disaster, in my role as the emergency manager, there would be an incident scene or a damage area. Maybe a storm comes through and damages some houses, or there's flooding that creates some problems, or strong winds and trees down in the road, and those sorts of things. In that type of an incident, it's really much easier to understand when you've kind of cleaned it up, stabilized it, and you're moving into rebuilding. With COVID-19, it's not going to be quite as clear for us on that. As we get more comfortable in rolling out the measures that start to reopen our businesses and our economy and our city, we'll start to see some of those glimmers of change. But as I've heard other people describe, there's not really an on and off switch, so to speak, but we will be transitioning into a new normal. And exactly what that looks like is kind of yet to be seen. But we're putting a lot of effort and a lot of smart people in charge of those things to gather bright minds and move forward together. So.
We want everybody to come out of this with not being scarred in their psyche or anything with regard to the things that we used to do, to be able to move on, maybe in a slightly adjusted way for a while, but hopefully we're able to get back to what we might have deemed to be a normal before. And it's going to be important, of course, for our economy. On a little bit of a different level, and I think it's a very interesting observation from the standpoint of exactly what can you lay your fingers on. In this one, you can see that you've cleared the roads, you've rebuilt buildings, the infrastructure's back in place, and people are able to move about and have their lives in safety and in comfort. In this case, an invisible enemy is out there that's disrupting everything in our lives in order to try to avoid another enemy, and that's the tamping down of the curve that we keep talking about, so that our medical systems are not overtaxed. So if we get to that point in the modeling that's in existence right now, in my mind, I see that as a bit of results on the front end. It doesn't mean it's the end of it, but and certainly there's things that'll have to be done beyond that, and we also know that it trails off the issue. That spike gets into another line of things, but still with infections. So I think that's it's an interesting area, and it is one of those things that I think is one of the things we battle with a little bit in order to even talk to the public about it. I got it on a little bit of a lighter note. As part of your job with us, and I might just tell the audience, you haven't been with us for just about a year now, I guess, but you come in and we have this declaration of emergency and you jump right into it. But you have had some occasions to deal with what could certainly be an emergency if we didn't have the kinds of skill sets that you and the rest of the city staff bring together to coordinate an event like the Open. These things, if they weren't planned and properly secured and properly maintained from the standpoint of health of the people that are out there, large hundreds of thousands of people, without the same kind of direction and coordination you're talking about here, we could have something less than what we're able to really conduct here in Scottsdale in relative peace and order. Do you think that's been a new ad for you as far as some of the use of the talents in NIMS and emergency control systems?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting about both scenarios, the COVID and how we're responding to that, but also large events like the Waste Management Phoenix Open, we use the same process. The planning process is the same. The way we build our organization, the people that are put in charge, the different areas, the planning process is relatively the same. The difference is with COVID, we didn't know it was coming. So it helps to have that standardized process, and that's the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, that you referred to a few times. And inside of that is the Incident Command System. And that's actually one of my specialties in some of the classes that I teach all over the place, actually. And it's designed so that all of the parts, players, agencies, whether they're local, county, state, or federal, can all interact seamlessly regardless of what kind of event it is, or in this case, an incident. We would call COVID-19 an incident rather than an event. But the planning process is very similar. So the other part of my job is to spend our off time when we're not in a special event or working in an incident like we are now, to prepare people, to train them, to provide those opportunities for them to do both online training, classroom training, real world exercises, and be prepared so that when we have an emergency or we're in a stressful situation, it's not the first time that we've met, not the first time that we practice the process. Yeah. So a lot of that goes into my off time, so to speak, when we're not doing these kinds of things.
Well, I think number one, from all that we see and as we move through this, and our community is to be congratulated too, in sort of following the recommendations that have come down from the federal government, the CDC, and of course the state and the governor's office and his executive orders, that we have a consistent and collaborative approach to it, so we're not distracted with a lot of different elements and different directions to go, and try to affect the best possible solution, particularly with somewhat of a unique situation. And if I were to do another shout out for not only yourself and your team and all the members on the city staff and management that have been working to conduct this all together, but also our private sector partners, whether it's the businesses in the chamber, or whether it's our Honor Health or the Mayo or the school district, or any of the other components in the private sector that all lend themselves to conducting a collaborative and concise type of approach to how we address the first mission, and that was to tamp it down and see where we can get from there. We can get to a better place as far as our economy is concerned. So I want to thank you for taking the time today to meet with me and with the audience that we have here, and explaining a little bit further exactly how much the city of Scottsdale, with your talents and others, it really brings to the table in something like this. And we want to make sure that we appreciate our citizens for cooperating and staying with us to this too. And we hope that we can get through this in a good manner and come back safe and to a near normal situation coming back. So again, thank you for what you're doing, and congratulations on your work. And with that, unless you have any other final statements yourself,
Mayor, I couldn't have said any better than you did. We all do this as a team, and we have great partners both internally and externally. And like I said, I'm just the air traffic controller. They actually fly the planes and make things happen. And I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
very good. Thanks, Troy. I appreciate it. It's good to see you and good to be able to talk to you about this.